It occurs to me, when did God make you the enemy?
What I've done in my own career, in my own life, comes from a lot of ingredients, right? I think Nebraska, Tom Osborne football is kind of one of those ingredients. It's like kind of like I grew up kind of part time in Nebraska, part time in the military. My dad was Air Force, my mother's Korean, and so the military upbringing is kind of in there too. And so somewhere along the line, my dad turned me on to the Beatles, and I'd sit on his lap and listen to Beatles records, Grand Funk Railroad, and so there's nobody in my family that's has musical talent.
Really?
It's
Yeah.
just that my dad loved music. Just early on, taking piano lessons and the kinds of seeds that were planted, um, and that's kind of in there too. And then I've got a big brother who always kind of led me in trends, and so my brother's influence on me is also pretty substantial because he always kind of led my trend.
Yeah.
When he started skateboarding, I started skateboarding.
So he must be pretty cool.
Yeah, he's the cool brother. He ended up being one of the most flown pilots in the Marine Corps for the V-22 Osprey. Just retired a couple years ago, but
That's
like
so
just
cool.
a total stud, and so
Yeah.
we get along great and everything. But he's always kind of led me in terms of those trends and everything. We were stationed in Germany in 1989. My dad was, and I showed up. I was just starting to teach myself guitar, and showed up to school one day, and first day of school, I was in German class, and this kid next to me looks at my book cover, and I had made book cover full of guitar drawings and all this stuff, and he goes, "Hey, do you play guitar?" I go, "Yeah, I do." He goes, "Well, I play drums," and so we ended up becoming best friends, and we started a band. We'd practice in his parents' attic. It was a small German town, and there was this big cold attic, and I'd go up there and I'd bring my amp, and he had drums, and I'd play guitar, and then eventually we found someone that played bass, and we were just playing cover bands, and I was like 15 years old, and like before you know it, I can't even remember how we got gigs, but before you know it, we were playing like beer festivals, and we were in a talent contest, and within the first year there, it's like immediately we were rehearsing for something. It wasn't just like
Just to do it, just to get together.
couple punks just
Yeah.
doing that. We were like, oh man, we got gigs,
Purposeful.
and so I was learning solos, and then I was performing solos, and I was so that happened, and that was really great. I always thought that performance experience kind of elevated me beyond just being a basement practicer musician, So it gave me all this sort of inertia in performing and audience and all that stuff. So when I came back to the States, I guess I'd improved enough as a guitar player. This was back in 1991, after the Berlin Wall had fallen. I was in Germany when the Berlin Wall fell,
Oh,
and
that's interesting.
the First Desert War. So it was just an interesting historical kind of pivot there too. I stepped into a music store called Russo's Music in Omaha, Nebraska, and John Schleusner was the owner, and he walked up and said, "Hey man, you ever teach guitar?" And I'm just playing scales, right? And some sweep arpeggios and all that, the stuff that was
He
trendy
heard
at
you
the
play
time.
and said that, yeah.
And I was like, well, that'd be cool.
Yeah.
And a week later, he called me and said, "Hey, I got a couple students for you if you want to come in." I'm like,
Okay.
so like I said, I've always kind of like just been encouraged by certain opportunities, and that the teaching then put me into music. I was just teaching from there, going to school. So anyway, Jimmy Weber walks in one day to the music store and is looking for a guitar player for the Air Force band. And I just had long hair, and John Schleusner recommended me because Jimmy was like, "I need a young kid who's compatible with the military, that doesn't have a drug problem, and all this stuff." And sort of like John's going, not him, no, that ain't gonna work. So like, you know what? There's this guy, this great kid that's teaching here, and so he recommended me. So anyways, after 1 year of college, for me that wasn't my thing. It's at University of Omaha. Everything kind of seemed like it ushered me to music education, and that's not where I wanted to be.
Right.
I just wanted to learn formal music theory, which I kind of had self-taught myself on guitar, and so I didn't find that that's kind of what I needed to be doing. So the Air Force opportunity was this amazing next opportunity that allowed me
Yeah.
just to stay doing music. And anyway, so I joined the Air Force, and then just from there it was like, 5 years of being in a really great gig, and then we're still making the pizza, right?
Yes, we are.
So we're still adding ingredients to the pizza.
Yeah.
I think one of the cool things about being in the Air Force, there's a lot of cool takeaways. One of the great things is that we'd play for the 4-star general or admiral. It was a joint command, Navy Air Force joint command, and Admiral Childs was there. And so part of the band's function is we'd go play cocktail music and then a dinner performance for the general and his audience that evening. And it was usually a room full of really kind of powerful men and women, and whether it's other generals or it's like the Russian missile team or the tennis French team being hosted by the senator, just feeling like the gravity of like a great man in a room commanding the attention of other great men and women.
Yeah.
And it's something you just felt, and you learn to kind of feel and like understand. Because I'd watch at least once a month, we'd have one of these functions for the admiral, and so it was an interesting thing. And so a lot of that kind of comes back into the pizza now, sort of like what's my makeup.
Yeah.
Somewhere along the line between the music elements and some of the like life elements of it, like it just kind of like set me up well for any kind of adversity, and I'm thankful for that. And it's I just kind of went with it as it felt right to me at the point in my life. It wasn't like I'm like, hey, I took all this time and I researched all that. It just kind of came to me through mentors and opportunities and situations. So anyway, that fast forwards us to, moving to Nashville and just kind of coming to town with kind of a Midwest Tom Osborne like culture to my work ethic, my passion for football, my military kind of thing, my mother's givingness, just sort of, she was just so giving, and so that kind of played into that too, like how I treated relationships and what I would do to bring value to a relationship and everything. So all those things kind of, I don't know, looking back, it's nothing I did, it's just kind of the way I was wired through like all these people in my life and all these opportunities. And so it's one of those things you don't take necessarily credit for it, you just, because you're kind of like pulled into all these great things. And you get into the business, and when I was in my first publishing deals, there's a lot of foreshadowing of how this business really plays out. It's hopes up, dreams crushed, hopes up, dreams crushed, and you're on a constant cycle like that. And like some of the earlier stuff, that I think maybe songwriters can relate to, and I went through is just my first publishing deal. I signed there as my first deal. I took all of my Schedule A and I gave it to the company, and it was Tom Schuyler was running the company, and Tom is fantastic. I love him to this day. I mean, he's a mentor and a legend. But like 3 months after I signed there, I had a single with Neil McCoy on Warner Brothers off of a work tape that I'd done. I had a cut with a young artist named Tebe who was on BNA, and it was like, this was 2 years after coming to Nashville, and it just all of a sudden was like, I'm really great. This is great. This is easy. This is all going to pay off. And then what happens is that Tebe, you go on radio tour with him, which I did, and I would go all over the country, and you got his next single and all this stuff, and you disappear for a week and you come back and he loses his deal. And the Neil McCoy single, the promotion staff's going, they're getting fired because there's a new label head. And so stuff like that, where it seems like all of a sudden there's a new house one day in your immediate dreams, immediate plans, and then the next day it goes away, when things are happening great, you're out, you're at parties, and you're high-fiving and drinking beer, and then that stuff goes away, and you're like, I don't want to see anybody ever. So there's that kind of roller coaster that I think everybody goes through.
That's right.
And it only gets worse, and the highs get higher, the lowers get lower, and but then you kind of learn that's the rhythm of life anyway. And so well, and from there it just gets bigger for me, and there's some of the more poignant examples of coming out of my second publishing deal, and this is where it's easy for me now to turn it into a positive. But at the time, you're in the mindset of trying to get writing, praying to the song gods that somehow you get one through and it creates some kind of significance or money or whatever, and position in this industry. And so around the end of my second publishing deal, there was a song infringed of mine, or so we thought, and so we believed,
Yeah.
and anyone that can listen for themselves. So that created this thing. It's sort of like, get off the pot kind of moment where you go, this is a real thing. This really happened to us, and my co-writers and I, without the support of the publisher, decided to take action on this song. And so, politically, a huge mistake. In this town, it was against two really established writers, and that was kind of a turning point for me, because it wasn't something that you move to town to get caught up in a lawsuit,
No, right.
or to have to learn about that. And so it was really 4.5 years is what that took. So I left that second deal kind of in a 4-year black hole of being disappointed and upset and violated, and having to deal with the bullies of the industry, and just knowing that you had to take action and follow through, and go through all the attorneys and learn about musicology and all these things. And at the end of it, the case got thrown out at summary judgment, but we actually kind of won on principle, and the opposing attorney has even admitted that behind the scenes, who I now know the attorney and have a lot of respect for him, and we actually talk, because they were just doing their job.
Right.
But at the time, it was like you felt kind of violated, and this was like, whatever, you're ostracized from the happening part of the industry because you're doing that, and whatever perceptions come along with that. Going through a lawsuit for copyright infringement, when you don't have the platform to really leverage anything, you're just kind of that thing. So, that point in my career, I really just kind of ducked out of everything. But at the same time, it was popping a paradigm, or shifting a paradigm of mine, which was very important for me down the road, because up until that point, I was praying to the gods that I would just somehow write, get lucky, and that is that world. But once you start to see the inner workings of copyright and law and the politics of this industry, and you really get to deep levels of that in an infringement suit, sitting down with one of the most brilliant attorneys during a deposition and having them, play with your brain like you're a cat toy or whatever. It's just like, okay, they just worked me over.
Wow.
And but I remember being challenged and enjoying that process in a sick kind of way. It was really weird. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm in the room with a genius. This is amazing.
It's really happening, yeah.
It really was. And so by that time of the process, it had shifted my whole understanding of how the music business was. And then that kind of pointed my compass more towards entrepreneurship, music business, understanding how the moving parts worked a little bit better. And so it was an important kind of moment where I shifted to that. And that's what, when you talk about any of those experiences, like how well can you at least attempt to have closure? And I'll give you a great example. There's an artist I worked with that we had a falling out, and for the longest time there was the talk and the mind, and having those conversations, and you'd play those out, and it's that weird thing that we all do. And I thought, the only way to do this is to make good with somebody, or at least do your best attempt at reaching out and making good with it. And so I found, and that was the first time I really released a lot of things, was like, oh my gosh, I found closure, because I reached out and I just did that thing that Jesus talks about.
That's right.
You really kind of turn the other cheek kind of thing.
Yeah.
So the thing that really kind of it kind of climaxed a couple years ago. There was an incident where I got attacked. I was walking across the street on Demonbreun with a good friend of mine, and it was this smile that got me into trouble. She walked across the street, and this car comes and pulls up and hits her, like kind of hits his brake and then runs into her, And then he started like pushing into her to kind of be like aggressive and, you know, king of the road. And so she's out there, and I look out and I run out there, and I'm like, whoa, this is crazy. So I'm smiling, and I go out there and I grab her and I pull her to the median, and I have my hand up like, this is crazy, move on, this is crazy. And the guy and his wife were out there screaming. He comes out and clocks me and breaks my jaw and strangles. Basically, out of that, I kind of like respond, and I kind of go after him, and so in some weird state of shock, because he's, you know, like 6'2" or something like that. And I'm, you know, if I stand up, I'm like Tom Cruise, you know, with my feet cut off, you know. So anyway, I just kind of went after him, and he just choked me out, and he strangled me, and sort of there I was. I wake up in the middle of the street, and it was kind of a thing, you know. I'd been attacked and almost kind of killed, really. He laid me in the street after choking me out. And went over and attacked my friend who I was with, and then I heard this sound of the world come rushing back in. It was like, shh, and I wake up, and I was, you know, spitting teeth out. I'm like, what happened to me? It's like blood, and people are freaking out. The girls are freaking out, and I'm like, what just happened? So we're kind of rushing to. We find a bathroom in the apartment building and everything, and I'm just gushing blood. And we're looking at my mouth, and there's teeth missing and chipped, and it's like my mouth was destroyed. I ended up with like 7 crowns and a new tooth and everything. But so if you go into the hospital, you know, I realized that I wasn't going to be able to do my appointments that week or 2 or for the next whatever. And I really had to slow down. But this kind of puts all these things together, like the energy flow of things. And this is where being from the Christian side and understanding the power of prayer. And if you focus on what you're grateful for, it fills the void of all those things, and it kind of starts manifesting those things. And you can use gratitude for so many things. Like you can use gratitude to get things you want. You can be grateful for the Grammy. You can be grateful for health that you don't have, you know?
There's always, even in the midst of yuck, there's something to be grateful for.
Yeah, grateful for the smallest thing or the biggest thing. And so another thing too, just if we go talk about music in general, I mean, this industry, it's almost like church, where it's everybody criticizes the church, but you love all the people individually in the church, and you're like, oh, these are really great people individually, but for some reason corporately it's sort of like there's all these hypocrisies and there's all this stuff wrong with the way it functions but I mean there's a few people that are kind of, you know, hypocritical, but for the most part there's really great people in the church. Music industry is kind of that way. It's easy to go, music industry they're just against me, you know. Everybody kind of gets to that, and then but you know all the individual people, and you go, well, there's a lot of really great people in the industry.
It occurs to me, when did God make you?